Let's go back to Washington now to CNN reporter Kristen Holmes. Kristen, what are the latest numbers? How are the Democrats tracking in the House of Representatives?
Well, we are projecting that the Democrats are taking the House. That's where the numbers are right now. We saw that number getting smaller and smaller. They had to get 23 seats, and now they are projected to win as high as 35 extra seats here. And it's really interesting the way it's broken down. You said all those historic races there, a lot of women. And the interesting thing about this entire process between the House and the Senate is this women candidates and women voters. We know that they came out in record numbers. We know that they came out for Democrats for the most part. And they're really a driving factor in this election cycle. So that's going to be something that Republicans are going to pay attention to as they move forward towards 2020. And I know we're barely through 2018, but that is what these Democrats and Republicans are thinking of. They're analyzing each of these races, each of these wins, each of these losses, and deciding what they're going to do for the general election. It might seem 2 years away, but it isn't. It's not. I mean, it is, but it's a lot closer. Campaigning will start a lot sooner. And there's a lot of messages here. Republicans have to figure out how to get back independents and women that they lost, suburban voters. Democrats have to figure out how to get back some of these red state voters. Indiana, Missouri, North Dakota. These are all states that were held by Democratic senators that lost tonight. So this is a win for President Trump in those areas.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Even though you say they're tracking potentially to get 35 extra seats in the House, they don't have the Senate. Can they really consider this a blue wave, or is it more like a blue trickle?
There's a medium between a blue wipeout and a blue trickle. This is a solid night for Democrats. This is what the polls said were going to happen, and this is what happened. You look at the map, big cities, suburbs, women voters all came out, and they came out in favor of Democrats. The other big number that we were looking at, we haven't gotten the analysis from the actual votes today, but we have them from the early voting numbers, which were 33 million, record numbers, young people coming out to vote. Democrats have long believed that if they could get young people to the polls, that they would vote in their favor. Still not as big of numbers as they could be, but they are growing and they are voting for Democrats. They're going to look at this as a huge win for them, maybe even call it a blue wave. I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to call it a blue wave, but Democrats are going to build this up, and they're going to build on that momentum and try to get this energy going as we head into 2020. But is it a complete wipeout? No, it's not. And that is very evident when you look at the Senate races. If it was a wipeout, you wouldn't have seen Missouri, North Dakota, Indiana all going Republican and Democrats losing their seats there. You would have seen some Democratic wins.
So what are the Democrats going to make their priorities in the House of Representatives, do you think? Is it just going to be frustrating Donald Trump's efforts, or is it going to be something more than that?
Well, I think a lot of it is going to be trying to frustrate his efforts. I also think we're going to see a lot of hearings. There's going to be a lot of investigations. All of those House committees that have been run by Democrats, the Judiciary, the Oversight Committee, those are now going to be, those are run by Republicans. Now they're going to be run by Democrats. We're already hearing from some of these Democrats saying they want to look into President Trump's taxes. They want to look into his immigration policy, his gun safety laws. So the ink is not dry on their win yet, and they're already talking about this. So they're going to want to start these investigations as soon as they have these leadership votes. So there's two folds there, but Democrats have to keep something in mind. This kind of alienation of Trump, this kind of talk of impeachment is clearly not going to work on a national level. Look at the playing field tonight. Again, I know I keep talking about these three states, but it's critical here. These were all states that were held by a Democratic senator that President Trump was voted in by double digits in 2016, and now they were all lost by that Democratic senator. So if they want a message that's going to reach a general election in the middle of the country, in Trump country, they need to be careful with this message of impeachment, this message of radical liberalism, as we talk about some of these candidates getting out there. And you heard Bernie Sanders playing that sound. Democrats need to come up with a fine line, because right now they have the Bernie Sanders calling for impeachment. Then they have the people like Claire McCaskill, like Joe Manchin, who won in West Virginia, who are walking a very conservative line in order to keep those seats in conservative areas. So Democrats really need to figure out a unifying message for their party.
On that note, can you tell me, I'm interested, how the Republican candidates who really aligned themselves with Trump during the campaign, how did they do? You know, the ones that appeared with Trump on stage, the one that really pinned their colours to his harder line agenda. How did they fare in all of this versus the ones that kind of pulled back from Donald Trump on the campaign trail?
Well, look, it really depends on the area. So, for example, in southern Florida, there was a district that was run by a Republican representative, Carlos Curbelo. It is a very liberal district. Representative Curbelo tried to distance himself from President Trump, especially when it came to climate change, but he lost his district. And a lot of that, people believe, had to do with the fact that he voted against the Affordable Care Act. So it's a little tricky there. That's already a liberal district. Hillary Clinton had won it by 16 points. So the fact that it flipped to Democrat was not that surprising, even though he was liked in the district. But then you have people who did align themselves with President Trump, winning in big numbers. We know that happened in North Dakota, in Indiana, in Missouri, and we'll see what happens in Arizona. Now, Montana, right now we have not called that race. It is fairly close, but if John Tester pulls that out, that will be a testament, because President Trump made this a race against John Tester, the senator there, because of what happened with his personal physician, Ronnie Jackson. He blamed John Tester for him leaving and outing him for all of those various things. So that will be interesting to see, too. But it really depends on the race. A lot of this has to do with location. In these states where President Trump won by double digits, in these Republican states, the candidates who campaigned with President Trump did really well. In states like Virginia, which are turning more blue than red, a woman, Barbara Comstock, who lost her race, she's a Republican, they were calling her Barbara Trumpstock. They were saying that she had voted with Trump 90% of the time, and that is why a lot of people believe she lost, because they thought she was too closely aligned. This was a liberal area. And so that's why it's kind of hard to answer that question, because if you look at the map, you're really looking at areas that support Trump versus areas that don't support Trump, and people doing accordingly based on that.
Kristen, before you go, obviously Bernie Sanders is all but putting his hand up to be the Democratic candidate for the 2020 election. Any others coming out of the woodwork this early in the game?
You know, there's a lot of speculation and a lot of rumors. It's Washington, and it is going to be an election year, and this is going to be a huge election. And so, of course, people talking about Joe Biden running, talking about Kamala Harris running. We saw her really take a lead when it came to those Kavanaugh hearings. We saw Cory Booker. That's another rumor of someone who might put his name in the hat here to run. But that's a big, not him, but the entire playing field. It's a big concern to many Democrats watching, because they don't see a unified message. I'm going to come back to this. They don't see the party backing one person. They see a split playing field. And how is that going to work if they're running against an opponent like Trump? We saw Trump in 2016 annihilate a field of Republicans and then beat out the projected or the assumed winner, Hillary Clinton, in 2016. He defied the polls. He defied conventional wisdom. So if Democrats are putting so many people out there on the field, how is that going to stack up against President Trump. We know he is a skilled campaigner.
Kristen Holmes there from Washington. Thanks for joining us, CNN reporter there.